evening, everyone. Welcome to the FCCT. My name is Tan Hui. I'm a board member of the FCCT as well as bureau chief of the Straits Times here. I'll be your moderator for tonight. Tonight we are here to talk about the two recent additions to the list of UNESCO World Heritage Sites, Thep in Thailand, as well as Khor in northern Cambodia. We're also here to discuss what it means when a historical site is inscribed in general. For the countries and the subject experts involved, it's often an opportunity to attract more funding for conservation, maybe for showcasing an important aspect of history, or perhaps revisit a narrative. And there are, of course, challenges that come along with all this attention. Sometimes such UNESCO listings can stir controversy. I remember like in 2008 when the Previha Temple in Cambodia got listed, it caused quite a stir among Thai nationalists who used it to attack the incumbent Thai government. Meanwhile, as you know, the wider region has gone through quite turbulent patches where precious parts of these important historical sites were looted and sent abroad. And we'd like to find out what does it involve to actually get these returns to their places of origin. So to discuss all of this, we've assembled an interesting panel tonight. We have from your left, Dr. Phacha Phanomvan, founder of the Thorani Institute, the Heritage and Sustainability think tank. To her left and your right is Dr. Noel Hidalgo, an archeologist from the Southeast Asian Regional Center for Archeology and Fine Arts. Next we have Dr. Anurak Depimai, from archeologist from Silpakorn University. And then we have Mr. Matt Wright, regional attaché from the Homeland Security Investigations of the United States. I'm going to start off with something a bit more general, looking first at Thailand and Thep. So Phacha and Dr. Anurak, can you tell me a bit more about what makes that site so special? Why was it listed by UNESCO? Who will want to go first?
Okay, good evening everyone. I am Anurak Depimai from Silpakorn University. So the first question, why Thep so special? I speak with Thep and Kun Prashapon and Khor Dr. Noel speak to you. The basic information of Thep. Thep is the largest city in the central Thailand, that located in the upper central in the Phetchabun province, and we can call it located in the Sak River basin. That this town had a long history of development that start in the prehistoric period and developed into the historical period under the two major culture. Two major culture is, the first one is Thorani culture that's influenced in the central area of Thailand. And the second culture is Khmer culture that's influenced in the northeastern Thailand. The Thorani start at 6th century and Khmer is influenced in the 11th century. And this town was abandoned before I think about 15th century AD. But there are a lot of the evidence remaining today. In particular, it remaining the urban planning is the quite greater than the other ancient town. The special urban planning of Thep is the twin tower, twin town that including the inner town in the west side and the outer town in the east side that stay together, that in the form of the twin. So we found a lot of evidence such as the ancient monument that you may know it as this is like Khao Khang Nok, located in the far away outside the city, and Khao Khang Nai that's located in the central area of the Thep in the inner town. In the UNESCO dossier, they divided in the area into the three areas. The first one is the city and its associates, and the second one is Khao Khang Nok, that's the main monument. That's the I think it is the largest Thawarawadi monument or the early historical largest monument in Thailand. So the third one is the Thamolas Cave that located far away to the west side of Thep, maybe 20 kilometers from Thep. That in the upper the mountain, we found in the cave we found the enclave of the Buddhist statue and the Bodhisattva statue on 11 statue that represent that Thep in the 9th century to 11th century that may be adopted as Mahayana Buddhism in this time. So it is the spatial trace that we can divide as Thep is the bigger town or the prosperity town in that time. And all of this that reflect that the development of Thep is for more than 800 years that the prosperity and abandoned or collapsed at the before 15th century. So, but in the dossier or the criteria, the uniqueness of the city of Thep is the second criteria of UNESCO. It is to exhibit an important interchange of human value over the span of time or within the cultural area of the world on development in architecture or technology, monument art, town planning, and landscape design. But in my opinion, I think I agree and disagree in this criteria. I disagree some point that particularly in the Thep is special in two aspects. The two aspects is diversity and purity. Diversity in academic that it located in the advantage point location that allow to constant flow of the culture between the central area of Thailand and northeastern Thailand area of Thailand. Maybe outside the region such as India civilization or Srivichai civilization in Indonesia, and also Khmer civilization in the east. So in dossier or criteria that raise the issue that Thep is Thawarawadi, only Thawarawadi period. I think it is correct, but not correct anymore. I think the Thep is the diversity city that combined with culture, another culture, two or three or four culture together that and raise the unique art such as we know as the school of Thep art that's different from Thawarawadi or different from Khmer art in this period. And the purity, I think the purity is involving the management that I think Thep is the lucky town that we reach them earlier than the smuggler or the illegal excavator. In maybe 30 years ago, fine art department go to Thep and survey and excavate something that it is the represent that the protection of the ancient town that I think is preserved, basically preserved or preliminarily preserved Thep in maybe 30 years ago, and it make the sea tape in the present too easy to manage. That's fine art department or Ministry of Culture can manage sea tape in the easy way. So they did the special of sea tape, diversity and purity, in my opinion.
Thank you. Dr. Phacha?
I have very limited comments to add to that excellent description. Although I do agree that the dossier itself, in terms of the universal value, is a future work. There's future work to be done on looking at the significance of the area in itself as a junction between different culture. It's just a small point to add to the uniqueness of the area in itself. I think part of the success that the main heritage, the main city inside the moat system is so well preserved has to do with a lot of the local caretakers, the community that surrounds them, using the space for very light agriculture purposes, while being mindful of the city as being a very long history of being a community sacred space. And that has allowed the community to interact with the site without looting, in the sense that we get in Utong or Kubua in terms of community development aspects. So that's why the site within the city is quite well preserved. That said, outside component 1, which is the main city itself, you have an area in component 2, which is the area surrounding Khao Klang Nok. And the area between component 2 and component 1, you have interceding monuments in between. And most of these monuments are on agricultural space. The uniqueness of that is that regardless of these spaces being sugarcane plantations, rice farms, they've left most of the ancient wells, the temples, the structures surrounding it. So they work around it instead of bulldozing through most of these sites like witness in other parts of Thailand. So that's my addition to the...
Thank you. So, yeah, the people play an important role in preserving this area. We'll come back to that later. Noel, would you like to talk a bit about the Cambodian site?
Yeah, so Kok Kae is it's an ancient capital of the Angkorean Empire. In fact, it was a concurrent capital at the time. I'm sure many of you have been to Angkor. It is the center of power for the Khmer civilization. And for a time, there were 2 capitals, one in Angkor and one in Kok Kae. And the details are a bit sketchy, but for a while, there was a succession issue, and there were 2 kings and 2 capitals at the same time. Kok Kae was the capital from 921 to about 948. And eventually, the capital moved back to Angkor. Why is a bit sketchy, but it seems that the water management system failed very fast, and so they had to move everything back to Angkor. Kok Kae is it's a spectacular site. It's about 2 hours away from Siem Reap, 80 kilometers away in Preah Vihear province. The main highlight of Kok Kae is this giant pyramid that's Prasat Thom, 5 stories, a 5-story stepped pyramid. Certainly worth a visit if you haven't been, and it's nice that to see that being listed in World Heritage, because I visited the site a year before they started the nomination process, and then they were stymied by COVID, and I was quite glad that it's finally on the World Heritage list. So it's a spectacular site, and it's contemporaneous to Thep around the time, but it was only active for about 40 years.
What are the benefits of having both sites listed, both immediate and maybe long-term? turn it up a little bit? Our technicians, can you turn it up a little bit? Well, I'm going to try to shout. What are the benefits of having both sites listed by UNESCO?
I'll take a stab. First, prestige for sure. I think a lot of countries do want to get their a site recognized as World Heritage because it is World Heritage. One of the very crass, probably crass to say it, but certainly one of the more tangible benefits of UNESCO listing is tourism. And sometimes I feel like state parties chase the the UNESCO listing for the tourism dollar rather than the heritage, and that is a bit of a problem. Those are the two benefits, but in order for a site to become World Heritage, the state party has to jump through several hoops. They have to commit to putting it on the national register, to commit to having a management plan in place, and commit to having a lot of, well, it's a lot like pinky promises though. So we promise that we will take care of the site, and once we get the site listed, hopefully the tourist dollar will pay for all the things that we promised for.
Anyone like to add?
So I share a lot of opinion with to Noel on this, and but to add a bit to that, I think the ongoing catchy term in terms of policy funding and policy transformation effort in Thailand now is ultimately a UNESCO listing fits into the agenda of soft power. It is used to calculate how the country's presence is there in terms of international ranking, how many World Heritage listed sites are within the country, and that's used for soft power calculation index, which fits into the ongoing, the current government's policy framework, which, while it does have restrictions on how a planning is handled, especially regarding community development, tourism planning, things like heritage impact assessment, it puts a lot of pressure on the government to look into areas, particularly sites like Thep, which have, for at least the last 50 years, been an overlooked area. A very good indicator of this is the district itself. Thep as a district is the furthest district away from the capital of the province, which is Mueang Phetchabun. It's about 2 hours drive. It's 3 hours drive from Bangkok. So it's caught in the middle of nowhere, and usually very minimal funding goes into that district. There's only 10,000 population in the area. So after the UNESCO listing, now every single organization is looking into how they can, at least for a very crass term also, sustainably develop the area. So it does unlock a lot of potential opportunities, but it has to be well managed. And it's how the country at a national level and the local level takes it from now on that matters.
It sounds like a lot of these countries seek UNESCO listing, hoping that it will bring the kind of returns that they see in other places. But are there instances where it just doesn't come through? What kind of challenges do you see facing these two sites? Please.
In all honesty, I'm not a big fan of tourism. As an economist, tourism has very low economic multiplier effect. That means tourism as industry tend not to build skilled jobs, higher skilled jobs or careers, which is what you want in long-term economic development plan. That aside, if managed properly, I think taking the aspect of how we should approach sites like Gokgea or Thep away from tourism and looking at the skilled sectors, how conservators, construction worker, craftsmanship that's required to conserve and take care of the site, and built on the site itself as a skill endowment, right? Something that you can create jobs, higher value jobs out of in terms of training. I think that's more sustainable in the long run and more profiting for the local economy. So if you set up, for example, field schools, open conservation centers there where scientists can go to do tests, conduct tests on the area. You have research funding, and it generates the economy in a different direction from tourism in a more sustainable manner also. So it ties to higher skill sectors within heritage industries itself. So for me, immediately jumping on tourism, yes, that's short run profit, but to keep the site running, you need to have a more holistic, I think, economic transitions and social transitions within the area.
It sounds like a lot needs to happen for these sites to be preserved. The downside of having all that attention on these two sites is also obviously it opens up opportunities for theft. I want to turn to Matt here because he's been sitting quite patiently. We really want to talk about the process by which artifacts, when they are stolen and brought overseas, how difficult or easy is it to get them returned to the original sites, and what happens in the process? Could you share a bit about that?
Absolutely. I've enjoyed getting to sit here and learn too, so it's been nice to sit here patiently. So I think even in the best scenarios, easy doesn't really look easy. I think it depends on a lot of things. First is the laws in place in the country of origin of the artifact. So generally there's got to be something to show that where we're able to document or show that the item was stolen from its rightful place where it belonged, and typically that's done by utilizing the laws that are in place to stop that from happening. So we're talking about whether it's laws related to cultural artifacts, customs laws related to proper export of certain types of items, or other things that may be able to be used to show that the item should not have left the country that it was in. And then the strength of those laws is really key in being able to document that information. Here in Thailand, the laws related to cultural heritage have been in place for nearly a century. So generally anything that's exported from Thailand in the last almost 100 years, if it wasn't done the right way, when we see those types of items land in the United States and there weren't proper export permits and there weren't those types of things, it's then very easy to look and say, okay, this is not supposed to be in the U.S. The person that didn't get it legally. Then I think also, obviously, the academic analysis and scientific analysis of the items to show what they are, where they're from, as part of the evidence. And then I think even when they're found, we know that they should go back to the country they're from. If they're with an owner that wants to object to that, it does complicate it. So if there's somebody that's willing to turn them over, surrender those items once they find out that maybe they thought they had them legally, and then they understand that they don't, if they're willing to turn them over, that's a much easier process than if they want to fight the return of them, which would then require forfeiture and court order. And then I think the cooperation with certain countries is obviously much better than others. With Thailand and Cambodia both, we've got significant cooperation where it does make it a lot easier to be able to return those items once we identify them.
What are the conditions about Thailand and Cambodia that make it easier for these artifacts to be returned?
So I think generally the cooperation, specifically in Thailand, for instance, with Fine Arts Department, and being able to discuss and share information. If we're going to return artifacts, we've got to be able to have the evidence that we need to be able to show that they were stolen, to be able to show where they were originally. So maybe there's an archeological survey, or there's a record from a museum inventory, or there's police reports documenting that items have been stolen. And then if we're able to get that information from the country, from the government, from the proper agencies within the country, then we're able to use that for evidence. If we're not able to have those types of conversations with the relevant agencies in the country, then we're not able to then move forward, being able to prove that the item was stolen. I think also, like I mentioned, the part about the export laws and things of that nature, if we're able to demonstrate that the items left the country, say for instance, if something was shipped out of Thailand and we're able to gain information about there were no export documents filed for this specific item, and we're able to utilize that information to show that it was exported improperly, which means that in the U.S., if it was imported in the United States contrary to law, then there's a violation that we could seize it for. So I really think the information sharing piece is critical. There's bilateral relationships with some countries which open up that information sharing a little bit more. And I think generally in Thailand and then in Cambodia, where we do have one of those agreements in place, the information sharing is really a key part of being able to move forward with returning the items.
Thank you. Well, now that we're on the topic of the government, let's talk a bit about what the governments need to do in order to protect these two sites, and also, for the want of a better word, develop these two sites, to their full potential. What do you guys think? Does anyone like to start? Everybody's looking at Anurak.
I can share just
Yes, please.
Just briefly,
Yeah.
Not about the protection specifically, because that's certainly an area of expertise for you all. But I think we see oftentimes recently in the news here in Thailand there was a recent case where information was discovered that there were individuals that were looting from specific sites, and then they were selling items either through marketplaces, through online environments, or through stores and those types of things. And I think, we're always looking for items that are showing up for sale in places, whether it's online or on the dark web or places like that. But I think for the countries where the items are able to be stolen, I think for law enforcement to identify ongoing sales of items that shouldn't be available for sale, I think it's important. And then in that specific scenario, they were able, from what the news story said, they were able to make arrests. They were able to identify those individuals that were selling the items. So I think, from a law enforcement perspective, I think enforcing the laws that are in place to be able to effectively hold people accountable when they do steal items that are not rightfully theirs, to try to export them.
So it's like proactive enforcement, keeping a lookout for things sold online. Okay.
So
Right.
I'll presume to speak for Cambodia for this, but bear in mind that I don't actually speak for Cambodia in this. Cambodia has been very proactive in setting up the nominations. I think in the last 10 years, they had Angkor, which they've had decades of experience managing. And then in the last 10 years, they've gotten Sambor Prekuk, Previhir listed, and now they have Kokke. And Cambodia generally has always been very supportive of UNESCO, probably one of the most supportive of UNESCO in the region. So they're very active in the World Heritage space, the intangible cultural heritage space, and they do have a high level of support for UNESCO initiatives. What has happened in the last 10 years is it used to be they would have a separate government entity called the Apsara Authority that looks after Angkor, and now that's come under the Ministry of Culture, and now they have national authorities for Angkor, a national authority for Previhir, a national authority for Sambor, and I'm sure because of Kokke, they will set up a national authority for Kokke. Certainly, I expect them to have yet another reorganization within the Ministry of Culture to manage all these. So I do think that Cambodia has the management system down pat, and there is it really helps a lot because there is a high level of on-the-ground support for antiquities protection. I think Cambodia is one of the few places where I find villagers willingly calling up the local authorities saying that they found something. either because they have a sense of responsibility to antiquities, or a sense of superstition, because there is also a sensitivity that if they find something that doesn't belong to them, they might be cursed if they keep it. Whereas in Thailand, I find the attitude to be different. If they find something, let's not tell the government because it's too much trouble for us to deal with it. And so we find that things get lost that way. So, there is I guess a difference in philosophies as well that you can see in the treatments. And for that reason, I find that Cambodia seems to be having a better management system for their sites. Yeah.
That's really fascinating, the role of the community. Would Phacha or Anurak like to add to that?
So in this question, let me remember in the when I was archaeologist at Thep that the major problem in the Thailand government that we are lack of the number of the personnel about art and culture. Archaeologists that's responsible to the regional fine art department. We have archaeologists, 3 or 4 archaeologists that take care the province that in the region, 5 or 6 province. That's maybe the province, one province not per one person. Maybe this is the major problem of fine art department or the government or the Ministry of Culture, lack of manpower. So when I was the archaeology student 10 years ago, my professor asked me about this question. What do you think about the situation of art and culture in our country? So when we was young, I think we have to depend the money to protect the heritage site, or we have to increase the number of manpower. So, and maybe we have to spread or advertise the academic archeological academic to the local people that relate with the heritage site. So all of this that's correct, but the professor say it is not the lower problem, the lower level problem. It is the higher problem level in the structural problem that the government have to take action in the issue. So he think we are setting up the issue about art and culture, or the problem about art and culture, to the national agenda, that for everyone or people of Thailand that realize and come together to fix this problem. So in this time, in that time, I was young. I have a lot, and think the professor is dramatically acting. So when I was archaeologist, I was a lecturer in Silpakorn University, and my friend as archaeologist, my friend is the member of Ministry of Culture. We think back to this event, and we agree with my professor. That's not the lower level problem. It is the higher problem that be raised in the national agenda. That everyone have to realize this problem, and everyone have to play a role as the protector or preserve the heritage sites.
Mm-hmm.
And just to which is I think Ajahn Anurak's point is excellent, and platforms the issue I've been addressing at CTEP for the last 5 years, which is to get the mindset of all the governmental bodies, local and national, to coordinate and look at a heritage space in a case of landscape management. Because if you approached her CTEP only from the perspective of the Ministry of Culture, then you're only looking at the historical park in itself, which is a governmental property. You can't address the wider monuments like Khao Khang Nok and all those sites in the different farms. So when thinking about monument, you can divide it into two separate issues, right? So you have the monuments that are on the surface of the ground, and everything else that is part of the historic landscape underneath the ground, including all the prehistoric burials around. For example, in Thep, it would be the Sak Estuary, where you have extensive looting activities, and by the way, all the metal scraps looted from these prehistoric burials are smelted into contemporary metalware. It's sold off in Lopburi. But to coordinate that, I think this is a case, something that Thailand can learn from Cambodia. The first thing that you need is an integrated urban planning law and mechanism that allows different government bodies to work together. So for example, to conserve a particular heritage site, the Fine Arts Department becomes the primary source for looking at the monument's integrity, for the restoration, for how the effects on the monument itself. But the land space in between, everything else that's surrounded, that's part of local urban planning department. So if the Fine Art Department doesn't work with the local planning office, which belongs to the district CEO, it means that this district office can authorize a road construction right through a monument. And a problem emerged in every kind of land management issue, and that's cadastral survey and the absence of clear demarcation lines, which tends to come in a case where you have overlapping landscape that is similar to CTEP and anywhere else in Thailand. So land demarcation in Thailand are organizing land space, what belongs to who, and urban planning for ancient cities belongs to the Ministry of Environment, Natural Resource and Environment work. They need to coordinate with the Fine Arts Department in looking at particular monuments that are listed on the national inventory system. Often information falls in between. So CTEP's a very good case where you have ongoing demarcation problem, where you're not sure. There's a lot of spaces that overlaps with ground monument sites, where it may or may not belong to a private owner, and when did the protection law come in, and how far do these demarcation lines extend? In overlapping space, very similar case you have in spaces related to national parks, for example. Right? The Land Department and the Treasury Department organizes their own kind of survey, issues out land deed plots. At the same time, there's an older database on measured lands that has to do with national park. Along the way, someone figured out that there's overlapping demarcation lines. That's never really sorted. The problem is when legally looking at these lines, that affects community, which are ultimately the safeguarder of the heritage space. If heritage property and the way it should be approached, whether that should be left as dead heritage, as in a isolated, non-living space, it's a huge park, or does it become a space that is urban heritage, part of a historic monument site that gets developed along under the protection of private landowners that are living within the wider landscape area? And you need legal clarities that way, which at least for most of the listed sites in Thailand, not even UNESCO listed sites, just listed properties, for example, cities like Pitsanulok, Sukhothai, you still have that blurred line problem where spaces belonging to the state, as in public land, and spaces belonging to private title deed owners overlap with one another. It puts the local community in constant contention with the state, which then you often get barely minimum cooperation between people living on the site and the governmental or authorities moving forward on how to deal with these particular monuments. You have that in another UNESCO listed site also in Kamphaeng Phet, which is another issue with not receiving enough tourism attention.
This is fascinating. We're going to take some questions from the floor soon, but I just want to follow up quickly with Dr. Phacha. So what's actually happening on the ground? How is the community, which is so important in preserving these sites, in protecting these sites, how is the community responding to the uncertainty with regards to their land titles and the overlapping claims on land?
Okay, so I think the thing is, when standalone monuments belong in title deed lands, the owner is faced with two situations, right? Let's say we take any type of property, and this is a classic case actually in Sak Kaeo province and a wider part of Buriram area, where the perception is, if my land contains any significant monument, it puts my ownership in contention with the authority, whether it will be expropriated, whether the state will one day try to attempt to buy my agricultural land off. And the drastic case is they destroy the site.
Sorry, what?
They destroy the site, the monument.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And you have a situation, the milder case, and we see this, because of regulation capacity, right? If you constantly isolate communities from the process of developing a proper heritage landscape, as in they see jobs being created, they see additional income coming in, whether by short-run tourism or there's scholarship programs being introduced to help facilitate younger generations to form art industry that's related to the site somehow. If they don't see that, then it just becomes, and in the word of the locals I've talked to themselves, a nuisance. And what happened is then it becomes a grab for short-run benefits. So, for example, in spaces like Thep, you have certain monuments that are already on the ground. They're restored or they're in piles, you can see them. But then, a wider part of the landscape is ancient burial grounds. You have bones, you have older settlements in the area, and those are the unmonitored grounds, right? In those areas, the moment the site becomes popular, right, becomes really popular like Thep is now, and I witnessed this firsthand, looting process in Thep died down. About a decade ago, where locals figured out they can't get any more beads, any more trinkets out of fields, plantation fields and crops. Suddenly, with the inscription process in the local market, you start seeing locals looking for ancient beads and selling them again, and now at premium price. So it thwarts the incentive of how people living in the area interact with these heritage space. In a system where you have limited archeologists, like in Thailand, the first defender matters a lot. And telling them that, unfortunately, I think for a wider part of Thai community, it is very hard to keep the rhetoric that these spaces are sacred, that these spaces are traditional. We have to face the reality. There's a very large group of people who no longer believe in the sacredness of these sites and are willing, and sometimes in climate and economic fluctuations, you have needs. If a strand of bead is going to pay a lot of money, they will go for that unless they see their well-being and economic lives transform in a way that becomes an alternative income to looting and destruction of the site. If large landowners or landowners within the community are allowed to keep their land instead of being tossed off their land, where their land is purchased off, right? I think the comparison for this is, you don't want to kick everyone out of Rome because it's an archeological park. So keeping that in mind, how do you keep people growing within a city, that their livelihoods and their culture is designed around the idea of modern development but conservation of the area? With the current government apparatus, I think there's enough incentive and policy instrument that can be done within the area. But whether policymakers will look beyond tourism and look at how they can assist landowners in which they cannot acquire those lands, right? Conserve these sites, develop these sites, and make a lot of people see that they can benefit more from looting or destroying the site. I think that matters a lot.
Thank you. We're gonna take some questions from the audience. Does anybody want to pose any questions to our panelists? If not, I'm gonna keep asking them questions. Oh yes, sir, please. Can we get a...
Yeah.
Okay. You've been talking about the enforcement of the law and the lack of clear legislative framework.
Well, maybe they can't.
But I'm afraid, please excuse my ignorance, but I don't know yet what there is in Thep, in Thep, in those terms. What is the site in Thep? How much of it is private land and how much of it is already public land? Forget about changing the law or anything. What is the situation today, and what are the rights of people, of any people, a tourist or anybody else, to keep or sell something that he finds there? What is the situation today, the legal situation?
Okay, so I recently conducted a large LiDAR survey on the site just to try to determine the land space. Being mindful that it was done under limited funding and we only managed to get portion of the space in component 001 and its buffer, the area between that and the component 002, in addition to minor pockets of the non-buffer site, which is part of the Phacha estuary, the looted sites that I've been mentioning, done. Otherwise, the rest is a compilation of the rest of the site. So, inside the main city area, which is the protected area under the Fine Arts Department. So that's part of, the inner city is part of the historical park. The outer city is scoped as a listed property, but up until the point of UNESCO listing, there's been soft kind of conservation policy that allows local to do some light agriculture work on that larger land space and do cattle herding within the area, which is a unique kind of local tradition for that space. Now, taking into account the wider landscape and the amount of monuments that are outside, okay? So component 002, listed under, protected under the government law, is a small square space. And between that, you have a very large blue zone of over 10,000 right in between. That space belonged to private landowner. But the catch is, the blue space that's listed as buffer zone doesn't cover most of what would be the whole comprehensive swath of landscape. So, for example, about 5 kilometers south of Thep, you find another monument, and that's completely unprotected, right? And the monument itself is as big as one of the major monuments inside the city in itself, and that's completely in a private land. So my estimation of it is that the problem is we only know of approximately 10%, and that's restored monument, okay, of the sites within Thep. We don't have comprehensive studies of the wider landscape and monitoring of all the individual sites. That means the rest is in private ownership or somewhere in between that has not been properly surveyed. So while there's good work done in the past to survey the sites within the landscape, look at the expansion area within around Khao Klang Nok, where you are finding more monuments surrounding it, expanding out. Everything else in between, for example, the sites that is east of Khao Klang Nok, there's about 5 major monuments, and those are not yet listed, surveyed, restored, or have even been monitored. So it's in a private land space.
Barriers around them?
Nope, nothing.
There's nothing at all?
Nope. It's completely in a private space. Fortunately, I've been able to get the cooperation of most of those landowners to see the value. So they're thinking of developing the site on their own. But here's where budgeting comes in. If the government should choose to acquire these land as costs, the 1997 Constitution made a huge change to land expropriation law. It needs to be purchased at market price. That puts a tension now between local landowners and the agenda of the authorities to buy these lands. If the landowners can prove that their ownership of those property precedes the enactment of the protection, the listing that comes in. So the legislation enacted to protect these sites within the area.
So what happens, for example, if one of these private landowners, because this at least happens in other countries, I assume it may happen in Thailand, what if he starts digging at some stage and he finds a bag of big gold coins? Right?
So by law, that belongs.
By law, what is the situation?
So he has 30 days, I think, if I remember correctly, 30 days? Yeah, to report to the state of that finding. Otherwise, it becomes an illegal loot. So technically, all artifacts discovered in anywhere in Thailand is protected by the state. Now, unfortunately, while I think Thailand has better capacity to protect things like lintels and Buddhist sculptures, in no way can we have the expertise or a way to monitor over what I call trinket materials, things like gold coins, literally a bag of gold coins. And that is how sellers handle these material. One, they have an option to smelt it. So most frequent source of sales point is take your Buddha sculpture or any bits and pieces of things you find in your land space that's gold, take it to the local gold shop. And they, yes. and they buy it for the gold value. And it's easier if that's not a Buddha. That means the gold coins could be, the owner could say, well, my parents collected these things. Can you please smelt this? And usually the sales process happens. There's not a lot of outreach into the businesses surrounding sales, which is the first point of exit for sales of antiquities that are found, particularly precious antiquities. It gets worse if it's beads.
That is quite disheartening to hear. But with the UNESCO listing, are the owners with lands where these monuments are located more likely to try to protect them or to try to destroy them in case they get more attention on their piece of land?
I think there's a tipping point with the ongoing disputes over land rights and the lack of clarity aside from usual tourism, sustainable tourism programs and the countless workshops that goes into the area. If local landowners, so there's two groups. There's groups that have the capacity to conserve, will conserve, and are thinking of way to privately develop these spaces into a museum, a learning center, integrating in community. There's a huge social enterprise in the area, and by law they contribute about 70%. I'm not sure about the exact number, but with their company registration, they're required to give back about 70% of their proceedings, their profit. So this group of landowner, they're definitely interested in helping authorities and the local communities benefit from these sites without destroying them. It's the smaller plots that I'm worried about. So nearer to Khao Klang Nok monument, which has been getting the primary attention, you have stupas inside chicken coops at the back of the house, literally. And when I entered about 3 years ago, they kind of showed me, like, we don't know what to do with this site. We know we should preserve it somehow. So I turned it into a chicken coop to avoid, to protect it from looters at the back of my house. That's one way to do it. But the owner herself, who is not very well off economically, she was asking me that, if this site becomes a UNESCO heritage site, will there be fundings for me to turn this particular monument into a tourism spot where people can walk through my house and I can turn it into a cafe with a monument site, basically. But that requires her to retain the ownership of that space. The authorities to work with her on the right conservation standard, and more importantly, funding to go in terms of urban development for her to turn that into a proper preserved space. The thing is, after inscription, you have this phenomena where everyone kind of just goes in, bypass the village, which in its effect, with the amount of traffic, has destroyed a huge portion of the road. And that's the response she's getting. Clearly, I went back, talked to her again. She's like, well, I'm not going to benefit from this, am I? And we have to keep reminding communities that they are very much in part an owner of these heritage sites, and that if any reforms will happen, it will require their participation to demand to the authorities that they want to keep these spaces, and more than demanding to keep the authority these spaces, there should be assistance for them to keep and maintain the structures with good integrity.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? Yes, please. Can we get a microphone to him?
Thank you very much, but I still can walk perfectly well.
Yes, please walk to the front.
I thought you had a question. I would like to ask, how would you estimate the level of education about archaeology and popularization of archaeology in Thailand at this point. Because I remember my Soviet childhood. I'm sorry, I didn't even introduce myself. My name is Yevgeny Belenky. I'm with the Russian news agency Novosti, and have been for quite a while here in Bangkok. So in my Soviet childhood, which was not really blessed with a lot of, well, too much freedom, we still had a very active and effective system of archaeological education. From school level, grade 2 up, and we had a lot of popular documentaries running on television every day. There was a special educational channel, and there you could see a lot of films like that. We had exhibitions. We had organized tours for school children to archaeological sites and museums. And more or less in Russia, they still have that now. In Thailand, I've seen a bit of this kind of activity in Ban Siem a while back. I saw a couple of weeks ago, I was in Ayutthaya, and I went to 3 museums there, and I saw groups of school children. But that's about it, what I've seen. So do you think the level of education about archaeology now is satisfactory at the moment, right? And do you think that better education and better popular knowledge about archaeology would be a remedy for looting, or would be too much knowledge in the wrong place?
Can I take this? Can I take this?
Please go ahead.
So, archaeology as an education discipline in Thailand is quite unique. It is a very closed system. In order to be an archaeologist in Thailand, you have to be from the Fine Arts Department, and in order to be in the Fine Arts Department as an archaeologist, you have to graduate from Silpakorn University. So it's a very, so you'll find that archaeologists in Thailand are members of a very small club. Everybody knows each other, and it's a very closed system, you know. I think in the most recent admissions, I think it's about what, 100, 200 per year that goes into Silpakorn to do archaeology, out of which maybe 9 to 11% actually end up being archaeologists, and that is typical for the region. So you're maybe adding 10 or 20 archaeologists in a good year, and you have to remember that at the same time you have the same amount retiring. So that's just archaeology education, and I don't think that's the right way to think about it. It's not about how many archaeologists and how many graduates in archaeology that you have in this. It's really more of a larger, what is the awareness about cultural heritage that you have in the country, which I think is more. I think it's definitely a lot more than 100 archaeology graduates per year, but that is one of the unique systemic problems of Thailand, that the qualification to be a practicing archaeologist is very niche, which also means sometimes there is a barrier for a member of the public who wants to engage in public archaeology. Is difficult. In many countries, there is something called public archaeology because it's something that members of the public can be involved in. Here it's because of this special qualification requirement, there is sometimes a perception on both sides that on one hand, you're not qualified to talk about archaeology, and on the other hand, well, I'm I'm not a Silpakorn graduate, so I don't have any standing to talk about archaeology. So that's archaeology in particular, but in the cultural heritage space, you know, cultural heritage is not just archaeology, it is traditions and religion, and there's more space to talk about cultural heritage vis-a-vis archaeology through there. Would my colleague from Silpakorn want to add some more?
Actually, I'll ask one little additional question to this, but I'll listen to your answer first. Sorry.
The Silpakorn graduate.
Yes. We are the first one of Faculty of Archaeologists, and I think the reason is we are the last one of this faculty, because archaeology in Thailand is unique, very unique. Maybe I will share some experience that maybe don't involve the education. When I was an archaeologist, I have many questions about, you ask first, when we dig in the backyard and we found the artifact, we found the gold coin, why the artifact or the gold coin or something we found not belong to us? This represents that everyone in the country, in Thailand, don't understand about monument law. The monument law is the control about archaeologists or artifact or everything about the world, the cultural heritage that have the harsh, the difficult punishment, but the local people or the people don't understand this law. Even the police. When I was the archaeologist, I reached to Phetchabun and chased the rooster, and I go to the police station and tell them about the situation that I found last night. They answer me, okay, I know, I will be there last night in the area of rooster. They go and see the rooster excavate the artifact or the heritage site. So even the police is not, the monument law is not popular or not well known. Maybe I think even the education, we are lack of the advertise or something like education that spread to the more people in this country. But I think, like I said before, the major problem of the archaeology or cultural heritage in Thailand is we are lack of the manpower that was received the higher educate of archaeology. Something maybe in the present that we should have the archaeological faculty more than one, maybe 2, 3, or 4 that make a challenge before the faculty that improve the efficiency of the archaeology academic. So this is the problem, and I think it will be a long-term problem in Thailand.
Let's shortly add to that also. I think one aspect of it is since COVID, we've been seeing actually at the heart of archaeology as a discipline itself, we've been seeing major universities out across the globe close down their archaeology program. And whether we like it or not, traditional archaeology as it had been done for the previous 50 years is an expensive business, particularly with scientific archaeology. That said, I think with the education of archaeology, we have to kind of separate archaeology as the excavation science, studying human pasts with scientific methods from conservation and heritage science itself. And for Thailand, I think heritage science is still very much lacking how to conserve monuments. We don't have enough people working on site and heritage site from core faculties like architecture, for example. There's very limited amount of graduates produced out of architecture from Chulalongkorn and Silpakorn per year that specializes in even Thai, the last 300 years Thai architectural structures, let alone going back to 1,800 years old structure. That becomes even a more severe shortage. So perhaps tiering, what Thailand wants to do we want to go down heritage conservation? Then that's about opening education for monument, for infrastructure construction, for conservation science, or and what is the balance with archeological studies that needs to go hand in hand with the narrative.
Thank you. Sounds like it needs to be opened up a lot more. Did you have a follow-up question?
Yes, it's just a little addition. Do they teach archaeology in Sathaban Chapat, in pedagogical universities in Thailand, to people who are going to be teachers of history from medium to high school? Because across the world, there are many countries where a teacher of history at high school is the center of both excavation, local, of course, and conservation. And high school students do the most important job, being a manual job, if we talk about excavation, or doing a sort of cultural, for the lack of a better word, propaganda about conservation, right? Maybe for Thailand it's a good thing to do as well.
I worked at a site south of Oxford for 3 years. It's a Anglo-Saxon and Roman site. It kind of overlaps with each other. And we ran a lot of field school, and it's an open, there's platform for students to register, and they pay the tuition fee. There's retirees who comes and learn every year until that particular retiree is now the British Museum expert on Roman pottery. So unfortunately, I think I've tried to pose this question around the option of having local excavation monitored and supervised by partially officials from the Fine Arts Department, Silpakorn University. There's a lot of regulations in the way Thailand is structured that doesn't allow for the outright education commercialization of archaeology in itself, if it's state funded, which leaves very little room on what the private sector can help in terms of archeological excavation and conservation efforts.
Thank you. Do we have another question? Okay, 2 questions.
Brian Mertens, freelance writer and editor. Want to ask a bit about the artifacts of Thep, especially this remarkable sculpture, which has such great fascination from the point of view of Thailand's and regional art history. Just 2 questions. Where is most of it now housed? I believe there's some in the National Museum. I'm wondering, is there also an exhibition at Thep of some of the recovered statues and other artifacts? And secondly, is there believed to be also many objects out in the world that need to be brought back to Thailand, Thep, of Thep origin? And this question is for any of the panelists, including perhaps Mr. Wright, on the question of recovery of objects from overseas that belong to the C-tape site.
I believe there are still some outstanding artifacts from C-tape that are going to be brought back from the US, no? From what I understand.
I'm not sure.
Okay, sure. Anyone else?
Artifact of C-tape is located different place in Thailand or abroad to the foreign country. At the C-tape historical park, they have a lot of, I think almost the artifact that's situated in that historical park, but the artistic or the special artifact they bring to the Bangkok National Museum. But I think most of it laid out in the storage, in the store of the National Museum. That when they renovate as last year, they choose some of them to exhibition. There's most of them stored in the storage. It is unfortunately to present because the artifact or the sculpture of C-tape is unique, very unique to study because it's different from the other arts of Thailand in the same period, such as Thorani or Khmer art. So maybe when the C-tape list in the World Heritage, I think we have to exhibit that object more occasion in the National Museum or in the National Historical Park also. Maybe it is right. Raise the education of C-tape is the interesting point. So, but in the case of the other fact that about to the foreigner, I think the most of it is situated located in USA. I don't remember the name of the museum. So nowadays the freelance organization that try to retrieve all of artifacts, and I think it depends on the public trend in the present, because that organization raised the issue to retrieve the artifact, I think 2 or 3 years ago, before the C-tape is listed in World Heritage. But the public not pay attention in this case. But nowadays, when C-tape has a World Heritage site, the trend was right again, and was raised again, and maybe something in sometime in this time, we have the social media, a lot of social media like YouTube or TikTok. When you list the YouTube, you in your timeline you will see C-tape content, one of the timeline. So it is this time is properly to raise the issue to the national agenda to retrieve all artifacts of C-tape back to National Historical Park of C-tape or back to the National Museum of Bangkok. Maybe this time is properly.
So you have an information center in C-tape with most of the replica of the key artifacts. Unfortunately, everything else, like Anurak said, in Thailand is stored in various national museums, namely the Bangkok National Museum. Some of them is in the Lopburi National Museum. Now, those are artifacts found and either by archeologists or part of inventory by the state. Everything else that's found by villagers are considered artifacts and not given to or registered if they're small beads, for example, or coins. Like recently, there's a coin that is found in Bung Sampan from the Thep period. But that's not found by an archaeologist, it's found by a local group. So when is that period? So that is approximately the 7th or 8th century, roughly. So for that particular coin, that will go into a local museum. Now, legally, there's no national museum registered at Thep, which means you don't have a curator and a museum researcher to conduct the conservation for the space. So Phetchabun province has been trying to push for a national museum in Thep. However, the response we've been getting is that they want a local museum to be set up, and then artifacts will be loaned temporarily for a short period of time to be displayed, or replicas to be permanently placed there, which then the province is not too happy with that solution. But the fine arts department itself is quite limited, and the response is, well, we don't have enough art historians or curators to designate and open another national museum and make sure it's well guarded. So now I think in terms of the different artifacts found in California I think the prime principal target is at the Northern Simon Museum, which houses most of the artifacts found from Tamarat Cave, and a whole swath of other stuff in the V&A Museum. It's few in the British Museum as well, and in the Berlin Museum. So it's found all across Europe, the United Kingdom, and United States in different places. But those are only a small amount that has emerged. So I hope we can retrieve them, and the matter of relocating them to its rightful place will be another struggle, much like the recently returned lintels.
Hopefully the listing would help.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah. Do we have another question?
Hi, Philip Sherwell from the Sunday Times. Thank you, everyone. It's kind of been covered the issue's been somewhat covered in these last two questions, but in terms of this debate about blessing or curse, and you're sort of there saying maybe a listing will help recover things, but in the build-up to a site prospectively becoming a UNESCO protected site, where there's all that buzz, you were mentioning, it makes people more aware of what needs returning to the site, but what sort of feeding frenzy does it also create in terms of maybe looting and thieving, not actually, and trafficking? Maybe from a law enforcement perspective, do you sort of see that someone's going to get a UNESCO status and that actually your heart sinks because it means that's going to be increasingly targeted rather than increasingly protected? Just interested to hear, in that, as I say, that build-up to the moment where it's just discussed but not actually in place, whether you see a real increase in thefts and looting.
So I think from our perspective, most of what we're dealing with are artifacts that were looted long ago and made their way to the U.S. a long time ago. So while I've read some of the stories since living in Thailand about some of the different sites that have been looted, most of what we're investigating has been gone from Thailand for a long time.
In terms of the frenzied, so I followed another group of sculptures that were looted from Thailand in the 1960s and the 1970s. And the media frenzy and the academic work surrounding it actually raised the price fivefold. Which then you have, instead of the amount of stuff that kind of circulates around the antiquities market in itself, you have the outright black market, where it's artifacts that were looted from the site, they're genuine antiques. Then you have forged copies reburied for the process of selling onto the market, which then creates another set of complexities on what's real, what's not real. But it does boost the production line, definitely, which makes sorting out returns and what's been looted even more complex. So I think that's the worry worrying side of the antiquities market. I'm trying to push the local communities to go for certified copies, actually, when it becomes work of craftsmanship instead. But unfortunately, most of the antiquities that are traded in Thailand, particularly now, there's I think 4 major producers, 1 large producer operating in between Cambodia and Thailand, that supplies most of the online market you see, including eBay. So 80% of the stuff claimed to be authentic are actually forged copies. And in that sense, because of certain hypes for particular goods, so you have things emerging more now claiming to be from Thep that are forged copies, and those are traded along, and it makes it easier for smugglers to smuggle real stuff along with copy stuff, which are treated as garden decorations.
Sounds exactly like how animals are trafficked. We're running out of time. I'd just like to pose just one question to all panelists. Just very briefly, we've talked about what the community can do and what the government can do, but now what can the public do? Just very briefly, what do you think us average people who are not archaeologists and not living near these monuments, what can we do to protect these sites? What are your thoughts? Could just go down the line.
I mean, I think the sharing and increasing awareness. I mean, I think bringing to people's attention the importance of maintaining these cultural artifacts.
Thank you.
Maybe I think the public people was clamp down and try to understand the archaeologists, the cultural personnel, that we have the limitation of the work or something like that. That I think the public, the member of public, there's maybe they have to volunteer in some occasion, like the holiday of the culture, or maybe the volunteer of preserve and protect monument that fine art department has need the member needs the more number of the number, because in nowadays the fine art department or the Ministry of Culture have a few volunteers, and the volunteer is over 60 years ago, but in the new generation they don't interest in the culture issue. This is the other problem in Thailand. So the public, the member of public can volunteer in the right occasion.
And convince their children to volunteer. Okay, Noel?
I think something that we often forget is that heritage is for the living, and it's not about buried treasure and monuments. It's about people who not just the people who live there, but for us, we should make it a point to learn about this heritage, to enjoy this heritage. It's called World Heritage for a reason. So it's in some sense also our heritage. So we should be learning and appreciating these different heritage too. And then because if we don't appreciate it, then who is it for? This heritage is just a label. No, it's not. It's supposed to be. It's meant to be experienced. It's meant to be enjoyed. It's meant to be learned from.
One, please don't buy antiquities, even though you suspect that they're copies, and tell your friends and family not to do so also. Two, if you see a little box that says donations, and this considers into historic property buildings also, if you see there's a box for donating into conservation funds, please tell people or your friends to donate more to support heritage conservation. That is something we see quite little in Thailand at the moment, unfortunately. I'm sure it's for Cambodia also. It is expensive to maintain a lot of structures, and for the people doing good, they really need the support.
Great. So don't buy antiquities. Donate your money. Convince your children, and maybe volunteer yourself. Enjoy your heritage. Well, that's really good advice for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us for this really, really fascinating discussion. Please join me in thanking our panelists. I'll see you at the FCCT again. Thank you.